Today I'm gonna push my computer to the absolute limit and do something that I've always wanted to do, and that is experience ancient Egypt as it was in 2400 BC. So we're gonna build it, we're gonna render out some cinematics, and then I'm gonna attempt to take it into VR and see it for myself. So join me on my journey into ancient Egypt using Unreal Engine 5. So believe it or not, I have a degree in art history. Why? I don't know. But one thing that I remember about learning art history is that I always wanted to not learn about how cool this ancient architecture was, but I wanted to experience it for myself. Fortunately, I didn't go into art history, but I did go into 3D, so now I have a certain superpower that allows me to create anything I want in 3 dimensions and then experience it in various different ways. And of course, Unreal Engine makes this all so much more accessible and easier, and it's just awesome. So to accomplish my goal of traveling to ancient Egypt, I first have to know exactly what it's going to look like. So this project starts where every other project starts, with good reference material. For Egypt, there's a ton, obviously, and there's even good 3D examples out there. But before even getting to the 3D model part, I needed to get my terrain. But it turns out in this case that the haters were right. I get a ton of hate for using 3ds Max, and everyone always says, Blender's so much better. In this case, it was. Blender has a plugin that allows me to go to Google Maps and just grab the terrain of Egypt that I need, and then use that information however I want to in Unreal Engine. For the 3ds Max faithful, don't worry, we will have our revenge. So Harvard University actually has a project called Digital Giza, and they have the whole thing built in 3D inside of Unity where you can navigate around it. But let me just tell you, it's hideous. If this was a car, it would be this car. And the user experience would be this guy. So I'm hoping to use this as visual reference, but ultimately to make something much, much cooler. But let's just say that the hard part of this project is not going to be modeling. That information is out there and available. But I do need to learn a bunch of new tricks to focus on some of the other areas that can really enhance it, like materials, for example. So more of that to come. I learned some awesome things about materials that I really enjoyed for this project. I also really wanted to focus on making it more cinematic and just dramatic overall, plus the VR part. All of that coming up. But for the modeling itself, I had great references, and I even found some downloadable 3D models that really helped me out. Unlike Hogwarts and Minas Tirith, I didn't have to model everything from scratch here, and the stuff that I did have to model, it just wasn't that complicated. I still have to clean up a lot of the models to make them more usable for materials and for rendering purposes, but this is actually a really common workflow in my everyday work, because I work for architects and they're often giving me models from Revit or SketchUp which aren't super usable, and so it's pretty common for me to use those as reference and to remodel things. Okay, because the modeling is kind of basic, it didn't take me long to jump right into Unreal Engine 5 and just start putting things together and seeing how it was going to look. I immediately got my revenge on the Blender nerds because I didn't end up using that Blender plugin after all. I actually got some height map information and just applied it directly to an Unreal Engine landscape object, and that worked out a lot better. So Of course, I used ultra dynamic skies again, which someone brought up in the comments doesn't hold up super well, and I agree, but it's so convenient for animation and for making ultra dynamic skies. So like HDRIs can be more photorealistic, but a lot harder to animate. So basically I love ultra dynamic skies, and it works perfectly for what I'm trying to do here. Overall, as is typical, I had to learn a bunch of new tools, plugins, etc. to get this thing done. And that's what I love about 3D, learning new stuff and sharing with you. We'll look at these things more in depth as we get to that part of the process of creating ancient Egypt. You may have noticed that I've been using Unreal Engine a lot lately, especially for these world building type projects. And that's because it's just hard to beat. It's so good at this kind of thing. Look at this here, building this landscape out. You can just intuitively sculpt it how you want, and it already started from actual Egyptian terrain. Plus, I can apply a material to it, in this case, brushify material, and then just paint in different variation into the landscape. And it just works really well on a very large scale, and when I get down closer for some of my camera shots, I can enhance it by adding different details there. But it's just so fast and so easy. And you can see I've even added water here, and I'm also scattering in palm trees. For this, I'm using the Polygon Flow tool, Dash, which they were kind enough to offer me a free trial of so I could use it for this video. And you can see I'm just scattering trees around. I can also paint trees around, paint foliage around. The tools are just excellent for building this kind of stuff, and I love it. So right now things are going real smooth. You've seen I haven't spent much time yet at all, and I've got something that's looking kind of like Egypt. So I'm excited about this, and I'm pushing forward. It's almost going too well at this point. Something's bound to happen to derail me. But I'm going to stay positive for now. Let's just wrap up the landscaping by saying that I added in some huge Megascans terrains, and I also brought in some Megascans foliage and started painting them around to start building out my environment. One thing to keep in mind that might end up being a problem eventually is that I intend to take this into VR. But let's talk about one thing that'll help in that regard by adding detail without having to actually model it in, and that is materials. In 3ds Max and V-Ray, I feel like I'm very competent making large composite and mixed materials that don't tile, but in Unreal Engine, I'm less familiar. But of course the capability is there. So I spent some time learning how to master mixed materials, blended materials in Unreal Engine, and I feel like I made some good prototypes that allowed me to apply good materials to large objects without having them look like they tile too much. Okay, I was gonna give a full technical demonstration of how I did all this, but I'm just gonna keep it short and sweet. You set up material layers, you use an attributes workflow in the material, and I basically made it copy a Megascans material. Then you set up a material layer blend, and there I used some different grunge maps to blend the layers in different ways. And then I set up a master material that could take multiple material layers and blend them together using the material layer blend. And that's it. Oh, and make some material instances so you can have multiple versions using the same master material. So that just makes a material that can be blended with other materials. So this was super helpful for materials in general, but it is not the coolest thing that I learned for materials on this project. In fact, I created a bunch of custom painted materials for this project, and that was like the most fun I've had in 3D in a long time. And that's because of some new things that I learned, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, but first, I want to talk about my sponsor for this video, Skillshare. As long as we're talking about learning new software and new skills, Skillshare fits right in. I'm so happy they're sponsoring this video because I've been a long-time user of Skillshare and also a teacher there. I love learning new skills, and this is how I do it. Learning online is my preferred way because I can learn at my own pace and I can choose from all the different topics that I need to know. From 3D to YouTube to video editing, whatever it is. For this project, I needed to learn more about Substance Painter because, like I said, I needed to paint some custom materials for this project. And of course, Skillshare had what I needed. But you can learn anything here. Skillshare has thousands of creative courses. It has countless categories. And one cool thing that I like is that they now have learning paths that you can follow. One thing I've always loved about learning in this way is that it's curated. They make sure the courses are high quality and you can follow one lesson at a time on demand and learn exactly what you need to learn. This course got me up and running with Substance real quick. If you need to learn some new skills or some new software, I recommend Skillshare. And there's never been a better time than now, because with my link below, the first 500 members that join get 1 month free of Skillshare, and I promise you they'll have something for what you need. Join with the link below and start creating. Now, let's check out how my substance learning plays out in the real world on this real project of ancient Egypt. Okay, I have to talk about Substance Painter because this seriously is so fun. And I cannot believe that it's taken me this long to finally kind of get it figured out and work it into my workflow. I've mostly understood it in the past, like what it does, but I've never quite figured it out, or maybe it's just that I didn't have a very specific need for it, because in Archviz I don't usually make these fully unwrapped, custom painted objects very often. It's usually more like tileable textures on buildings. But frankly, that was just dumb. In this case, I wanted to use it to develop some more hero objects, where I knew I wanted something right up close and personal with the camera. And I was really going to focus on it and add a lot of detail there in that specific area. So one place that I knew I was going to have a camera shot was in the tombs, the mastabas, I think is what you call these.
A mastaba is a type of ancient Egyptian tomb in the form of a flat-roofed, rectangular structure with inward sloping sides, constructed out of mud bricks or limestone. These edifices marked the burial sites of many eminent Egyptians during Egypt's early dynastic period and Old Kingdom.
So I got into Substance Painter and I really used brick smart material, but then a bunch of other layers to just add more and more interest to these things so that they could really hold up nicely. But what was really cool is when I just started painting different textures into different areas of the object. And of course I can do filters, like it can add grunge, it can add age, it can roughen up your corners, it can add all sorts of ambient occlusion type effects, but then you can just straight up paint onto it to paint different materials. So this tomb has a couple different materials on it, some solid stones, some stacked stone, and you can just paint it directly on, and I didn't even have to unwrap this thing. Substance handled all of that for me, and I just started painting. It's freaking awesome. Okay, and seriously, you know I love workflows where the technology just kind of gets out of your way and you're just able to be fully creative. Well, once you get the hang of this Substance Painter stuff, that's what it feels like. It's fantastic. As a side note, one really cool thing that I do remember from my art history classes is that these mastaba, I don't know how you pronounce it, these tombs were the early iterations of the pyramids. If you take these with their slanted walls and their flat roofs and then stack another one on top of it and then another one on top of that, you have a stepped pyramid, and that is the intermediate step to having a full pyramid with completely slanted sides and no steps. So it's cool to see throughout history how these tombs evolve. And in this particular site, we have hundreds, maybe thousands of years of architectural evolution all in the same place. Pretty cool. And of course, we cannot forget about Mr. Sphinx, the ultimate hero object. I did a lot of work on him in Substance as well. You can see I chose to just kind of hand paint the materials onto him because historically they believe the Sphinx would have been painted. I decided to actually put some gilding on him, not because that's accurate, but because I thought it looked cool. So yeah, but all the hand painting of this color onto the stone, I can just digitally paint it in Substance, and that is awesome.
The Great Sphinx of Giza is believed to have been created during the reign of Khafre, circa 2558 to 2532 BC. It is 240 feet long and 66 foot tall. It is believed that the Sphinx represents Khafre and is an integral part of his pyramid complex that includes his pyramid tomb, the Sphinx, and temples. The Great Sphinx of Giza was likely painted in bright colors, including red, yellow, and blue, at some point in its history.
Okay, with the help of Substance, everything is coming along so nicely. Here's a little sneak peek at what our Sphinx is looking like in Unreal Engine. And the tomb as well. But we'll save the best of that for the full cinematics coming up in just a minute. Did I mention how fun it was to work in Substance? Here I'm just painting in normals, which is an awesome thing to be able to do. Working on the Pyramidion, which I was super sad to realize the whole thing about it being gilded and sparkling in the sun, covered in gold, it's probably not true. There's no evidence for this. Major bummer. I left mine gilded anyway because it looks awesome. And we're actually not positive that it wasn't covered in gold or electrum, so I'm going with it.
A pyramidion, plural, pyramidia, is the capstone of an Egyptian pyramid or the upper section of an obelisk. Pyramidia were usually made of limestone, sandstone, basalt, or granite, and were sometimes covered with plates of copper, gold, or electrum.
This isn't what it really looked like, but I'm just copying another pyramidion from a different part of Egypt, a different time in Egypt, because I thought it was cool looking, but man, it is so fun to paint like this in 3D. I'm doing this particular object because there's a specific shot I want in the cinematics, so you'll see it when we get to that. Hopefully it comes out cool. Okay, I talked about the tool Dash that I'm using, and what it really does is streamline a lot of the cool tools that I need to use in Unreal Engine into a very simplified UI that makes it just really easy. Some things in Unreal Engine can be overwhelming, but Dash kind of takes the things that I really want to use and puts them into a much simpler workflow. A good example of that right here is physics painting. Look how freaking cool this is. And it's super easy to set up. You just tell it which objects you want to paint, and then you just start painting, and everything falls into place. Again, another super fun and intuitive workflow that just works super easily. So I'm using this and other similar tools to kind of put finishing touches on some of my shots, adding in detail, adding a ton of mega scans, because that stuff always looks killer right up close to the camera, far away, whatever it is. And I did not scrimp on the quality. I was bringing in tons of the nanite quality stuff. And so my materials, my objects are all not optimized whatsoever. And that should be real interesting when I try to go into VR. We'll see how that goes for me. Here's another example of what I'm talking about, where Dash just gives me a grid scatter tool, and like I can just put a mega scan stone in there and scatter it as a grid and just make a pile of stones, and you can automatically add variation and all that kind of stuff. It just makes it really easy. Like, you could do this without Dash, but would you really want to? And it's just creating some foreground stuff that looks really good right up in front of the camera. And then some more physics. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time here because A, we've seen a lot of this before, and B, I want to get to the cinematics quickly so that then we can experiment with the VR. And I think the cinematics are looking very promising at this point. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of the finishing touches. My model's not even done yet, but I'm figuring out foliage, scattering around a bunch of like reeds and other kind of river type foliage. And in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, the way it worked was the Nile comes through, it floods every year, it makes very, very fertile soil and land in the flood grounds, and then it will recede a little bit. But in those transition areas, that's kind of what I'm trying to represent here. Flood areas versus desert. And it is presumed, possibly known for sure, that the Egyptians built canals that could bring their ships closer to these temple and tomb and burial areas. But the way it works is they bring the ship, it's basically a funeral procession, and they bring it to the valley temples, which are out here on the water basically, and then the procession with the body and all the stuff they're going to be buried with in their tomb will proceed along these large causeways to the mortuary temples, and then they will be entombed in the pyramids themselves. So really, really cool, trying to represent the nature of all that with my foliage and with the water and with the terrain, and still need to build some of that out with the model too. But the nice thing at this point is I've got basically all the foliage I want figured out. I've got the terrain mostly figured out. Now it's just a matter of doing the work. Okay, so one thing I really wanted to do on this one is focus on being as cinematic as possible with my camera shots. So this time I even made a storyboard, and based off of that storyboard, I really concentrated on certain areas, getting the lighting just right, the camera movements just right, and the detail just right to tell that story properly. So I think that's going to pay off in the end. You guys will, of course, let me know in the comments what you think of the cinematics. They are coming up next. But speaking of comments, I really want to highlight some of my favorites again. You guys enjoyed that last time. The hilariously bad hater comments that I got. This time though, on my last video, the comments were all super positive. So thanks for that, thanks for commenting, and thanks for watching. In particular, I find this one kind of funny about my Hollywood doppelganger. What actor do you guys think that I look like? This is funny to me because I actually get it all the time. Who do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. Okay, on to the cinematics. Let's check them out. Grab your popcorn. Okay guys, hopefully you enjoyed that and thought it was cool. Enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. I always love doing these projects. And I know it's not perfect. There's always room for improvement. But I feel like this really gave me a good feel and gave us a good feel of what ancient Egypt looked like. And that is awesome. Now, along those same lines, let's go even further and jump into virtual reality with this so I can see what it was like to actually be there in ancient Egypt. I think that's going to be awesome. I said at the beginning that I was going to push my computer to the limits. Well, now it's time to do that. Cinematics, the computer can handle that easy. But virtual reality, I don't know. Before we jump into that though, if you have found this useful, if you liked the cinematics, if you like to see my process, and if you want to see more projects in the future, please like the video and subscribe. That's what keeps me going and lets me know that you're liking these projects, and also comment what other projects you want to see down below. I am shamelessly seeking after 100,000 subscribers so I can get one of those really cool plaques to put right here on my wall so you guys can see it every time I make a video. But in all seriousness, subscribing is huge because it lets me know that you're liking what I'm doing and I should keep doing it. So if you feel so inclined, please subscribe. I've got so many more projects planned. I hope when I make 100,000 subscribers that I will be able to make some of these projects more available for download so that you can navigate them as well. I've got big plans, but it all depends on you guys liking the content. So I appreciate you. Let's jump into virtual reality. I basically spent the length of this project just destroying my frame rate, and not that this is the biggest project I've ever made or anything, but I have literally just tried to do everything high quality and not think about frame rate at all. But I'm just going to take it directly into VR and see if it works. Not recommended. Some of you will know, if you've used VR before, that sometimes the graphic quality isn't the most important thing. VR, even at bad quality, is very, very good at communicating the scale of a place, the proportions of a place. That's how I use it in my work, and that's how I want to use it here. The scale of Egypt, you can't catch it from the cinematics very easily. But when you're standing in there in person, the scale is, well, I think it's going to be totally insane, because these pyramids are huge. The statues are huge. I really want to stand next to them and see what that feels like. After I got the VR functionality in, my first attempt was an utter fail. It didn't just shut down my Unreal Engine, it shut down everything. I got this screen. I've never even seen this screen before. I think it represents my computer melting or something. So I'm not sure at this point that it's going to work. So here's the things that I did. First, I needed to set up a navigation mesh that covers my whole scene so I can navigate around it. Then realize I don't even know how to use the VR controls in Unreal Engine anymore because they've changed. So I need to go practice on the default VR scene. Okay, this is working great. Now let's go back to my scene and see if I can run it. You may have noticed that I'm running super old VR hardware. Still works though. I just needed to update it all, get it all up and running again. It's still hanging in there. Don't make fun of me. Now there's nothing left but to just give it a go and see if it works. Unfortunately, running it on cinematic mode, I already know melts my computer, so I set the scalability all the way down to low just to make it work. What sucks about this is it barely looks better than that Harvard Giza project thing that I was making fun of. So all this brings me to here. Okay, I have my nav mesh set up. I have my VR headset working. Everything's good to go. And I am going to jump into here. I'm going to try and set the scalability to something higher. So I've set it to epic here. Engine scalability settings. I already know cinematic does not work, okay? But I've set it to epic here, and I'm going to see if I can get in here and if it works without absolutely destroying my computer. Let's see. Come on, baby. Okay. Nothing happening yet. My computer's ready to kill me. Oh, that was it. Okay, I'm back. That crashed my computer, but I have not given up hope. I think it can still work. I don't know what happened. There's a lot going on the computer. My hard drive is filling up rapidly. I'm recording my screen. I'm trying to do VR at way too high settings in a project that is not optimized for VR in any way whatsoever. Okay, so I'm doing a lot of things that you shouldn't, but I'm going to try it again anyway. Here we go. Moment of truth. It's working. The textures look awesome. Oh boy. Yes, sirree. It is working. I got my atmospheric fog going on. Oh my gosh. Oh, the texture looks so good. Okay guys, from here I just spent some time walking around in ancient Egypt, epic, and I just explored around. I mean, check out the scale of standing next to this sphinx, and this is just one of the small sphinxes. Totally mind-blowing how big this stuff is in scale. Textures are looking super cool. You can't tell via the screen, but it just feels like you're in this space when you're in VR, and that's awesome. Check out these Khafre statues, I think they are. These things look amazing, and they're humongous. Like, his knee is at my head level. So this really gives you the sense of what it was like. Very, very cool. Of course, there's a bunch of parts I haven't modeled and they look totally wrong when you start navigating it like this. But that is not the point of this project. Okay, I gotta go check out the scale of the pyramids up close. It's done with me. Everything is failing. Okay. Ah, but that was amazing, dude. That was just amazing. Okay, so it was not without its issues, but I did eventually accomplish my goal of seeing the pyramids as they were in ancient times, up close and personal in virtual reality. And I have to tell you, there's nothing quite like it. VR is a special tool that puts you in that place like nothing else. And this is just always something I wanted to see, and this is really cool. So, I'm glad that I had the skills to make it happen, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. I also had the pleasure of sharing it with my kids, and I think my daughter's reaction says it all. Pretty crazy how big it is, huh?
I know, it's huge. You know, the pictures don't really do it justice. I mean, when you're in it, then you're like, whoa.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, if you like the projects that I do, if you like 3D, Unreal Engine, 3ds Max, all that stuff, there's so much more to come, so make sure to subscribe. I will catch you in the next project in the next video.